Now, one of the reasons why reactive abuse is so manipulative is because it keeps the person who's being abused focused on their outbursts, on their emotions, on their behavior, rather than focus on what is happening right in front of their eyes.
It just gets worked up sometimes. So I tell you, like, when I was like on vacations, I didn't want to go anywhere. It was comedy focused me. It was just, I'm very hacky. A little squabble started because we were getting overtly physical. I'm just trying to keep it away and not get hurt. And the flies here are like pretty intense, so the flies are definitely going to get into her.
Hey my beautiful souls, welcome back to Finding with Jessie, the life coach. So today we are going to be zoning in on reactive abuse, getting really aware about it. Some people might know what that is, some people might not be aware. I often find a lot of people are familiar with the scenario and have been subjected to reactive abuse, but have no idea really about the verbiage and how deep it goes and how it's connected to narcissistic and toxic relationships. So today we're going to be doing things a little bit different. Today I'm going to be zoning in on this national case that's been taking headlines by storm, which is the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie case. Now, one of the reasons that we're going to be zoning in on this case is because reactive abuse was huge in this video, and there was a lot of narcissistic manipulation traits that Brian Laundrie was showcasing, and a lot of people to this day still have not picked up on it. Now, as the information is developing and the case is developing, a lot of people are coming forward and speaking about his personality and characteristics and the dynamics of their relationship, and it's kind of painting a picture. But people are still not aware of what to look out for and how this body cam footage really gave a lot of information on huge red flags and indications that showed that he actually was an abuser versus a victim. And today I'm going to be reviewing that to help everybody see and learn about what reactive abuse is if you don't already know what it is. So first and foremost, we're going to be defining and speaking about what reactive abuse is. So reactive abuse is a verbal, physical, or express inadvertent outburst to abuse. So a lot of people have been subjected to reactive abuse, but they've never known what it is. And they've never known that there was a proper verbiage, a proper term for it, and that is a part of a manipulation tactic. So when I say a lot of people have been subjected to it, a lot of people can relate to this. So reactive abuse is when a toxic person pushes your buttons to the extreme to when you completely lose control. They poke and poke and poke and poke the bear until the bear is ready to attack. So many people can relate to that, right? Someone who comes in, antagonizes you, insults you, calls you names. They might get violent, they might get physical. They might do something to really create this hostile reaction in you. And then when you react, they're super calm and they play the victim. So a lot of people can relate to that. So one thing I noticed during this case and that body cam footage was that what this girl was going through and what she was displaying, her characteristics in the beginning of this video, was signs of emotional distress and reactive abuse. Now, reactive abuse can be really dangerous, as we see in this case. Now, something to really keep in mind is that when you're dealing or you witness someone that is showing traits of reactive abuse, one, it's been going on for quite some time. Two, there is emotional and psychological abuse going on there. And three, it could be really indicative of the abuser dealing with a personality disorder or some type of mental illness. So reactive abuse is a toxic person's playground. It's when the devil gets you to do their work for them. And they do all this crazy making in you until the point that you snap. You start showing outburst reactions towards them.
You never saw the male strike the female. He saw a male trying to lock her out of the vehicle. She even told us that he was trying to lock her out, told her to go take a walk. So that she was trying to get in. She eventually couldn't get in and actually fought her way in through the driver's door. He said, I don't understand why she's doing that. Well, I think it's...
reason why this is so dangerous is because you start looking like you are the abuser and they are the victim.
So at this point, unless the guy's screaming that he needs to go to jail and did something to this girl, it sounds to me like she is the primary aggressor.
They are the victim in front of people who are not aware what reactive abuse is and who do not know the whole complete story. So this is a witness statement that sheds a little bit more light into the whole story. So the statement reads, at approximately 4:30 p.m., I arrived at Moonflower. While standing on the south side of the street, I observed a man and a woman appear to have some sort of a dispute. They were talking aggressively at each other and something seemed off. At one point, they were sort of fighting over a phone. I think the male took the female's phone. It appeared that he didn't want her in the white van. He got into the driver's seat and she followed him. At one point, she was punching him in the arm and off face and trying to get into the van. She eventually climbed in over him and over the passenger seat. I heard her say, "Why do you have to be so mean?" I wasn't sure how serious this was. It was hard to tell if it was sort of play fighting, but from my point of view, something definitely didn't seem right. It was as if the guy was trying to leave her and maybe take her phone. Not sure, but wanted to help. I noticed another person had called this in, and as soon as I left the store, I noticed a police officer and gave him my contact info. Now, this eyewitness's statement sounds very different from a man just trying to get into a car and get away from his girlfriend versus a man trying to get in the car and leave his girlfriend behind. This also comes after another witness who called 911. So what happens, to give you a framework of what actually develops, is the abuser is going to make you crazy. They'll belittle you.
You know, I maybe like do any of it just kind of in like a, I don't know.
They'll insult you. They might even get physical with you.
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
It's okay if you're saying you didn't get it. I understand if you get you, but we want to know the truth if you actually hit you. Did you? Where did he hit you? Somewhere. Hang on.
They'll yell at you.
And then I got really loud and like, that's fine. Your attention, that's fine. That's got good way. Just give me a... Okay, so...
They'll withhold things from you.
And you were having me in the car before, and then...
She wanted, I don't think it's like, San Francisco for walking to, trying to get the keys for me, so I just going, just leave back up.
They become very obsessive, possessive, controlling, domineering towards you.
I was on the keys because I didn't want to go anywhere.
They'll do all types of different emotional and psychological abuse to you, and to the point that you snap and you lose control. And then you wind up looking like the crazy one. You wind up looking like the abuser.
Okay, so you said you pushed her to create some distance, obviously, right? What happened after that? What got the scratches on her? So you pushed her and she was, it wasn't like a pushing, she jumped on me, she was already, I don't know, she was already swinging, and I was comfortable. Yeah, I don't know, it was on hands, on rings, you scratched in your neck,
you wind up looking at the person that's creating the hostile environment, because people, the audience, that the only thing they're viewing is your aberrant behavior towards them, your outbursts, your hostility, you actually snapping and saying enough is enough, and you start fighting back, right? And it might be a physical fight, it might be a physical altercation, or it just might be an emotional, remember, emotional, physical, or expressed outbursts to them. The reason why you start looking like the bad guy and you get labeled the aggressor and the person who's being abusive is because the other person, the one who actually initiated the abuse, the person who actually created this hostile outburst in you, is sitting back calm in nature. They look like they couldn't hurt a fly, and they actually play victim. When they are approached with the scenario and the situation, everything is not their fault. They have no idea what's wrong with you. And now this is going to work in the abuser's favor. Why, you ask? Because while the person who's being pushed and pushed and pushed to become hostile, and they have these outbursts, you are pushed to become reactive, while the abuser, the real initiator, the oppressor, becomes and remains calm. So in the audience's eyes, in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of the onlookers, in the eyes of the people who are not well versed in the history and not knowing how this whole situation played out from the beginning, and they are not very intuitive and they're not familiar with abuse and abusive dynamics and abusive tactics, they're going to view that person, the person who's having the outburst, as problematic. The person who's emotionally unstable, the person who's psychologically imbalanced, the person who is the aggressor, the person who is hostile, the person who's not able to take control and regulate their emotions, the person who is going to be considered dangerous, the person who's going to be considered an issue. And my favorite one, the crazy person. You'll always find with toxic individuals, they will label their victim crazy. Of course they're crazy because they made them that way. And of course they look crazy to others because they have been involved in a power play of crazy making by their abuser. Reactive abuse can be super tricky in domestic cases because it's super hard to detect if you have not been there for the beginning of the story. And that's what happens in a lot of cases. A lot of cases, police officers and people of authority are coming in either in the middle of the story or at the tail end when a lot of this has already played out, and they're coming in not seeing the beginning of the story, and they could be really quick to label the person who's being abused as the abuser. Very common for a person who's been abused to get to their wits end. You probably heard the saying, you know, even the kindest people could turn really dark and could turn really mean, because, you know, everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has a point when enough is enough and you can't tolerate anymore, and they become very aggressive and they start becoming hostile, of course, because your nervous system is being impacted, which is something a lot of people don't realize when you're dealing with emotional abuse. When you're dealing with emotional and psychological abuse, your nervous system is getting impacted, and when you start putting stress on the nervous system, you start creating the flight or fight response. Some people will flee. Some people are going to stay and fight. That could be physically fighting. It could be lashing out. Like I said, it could be yelling. It could be throwing things. It could be throwing insults. It gets really ugly. And when you're not privileged to what was said before, what was not done before, hating that was done prior to this person lashing out and things of that sort, it becomes dangerous because you label it incorrectly. Also not uncommon for the abusers to start minimizing their part. They
It was probably both of you. He was just they're being small but started because you're angry.
They're gonna minimize it. They're either gonna detach from it, so they're gonna use a lot of distancing language. Like they're gonna distance themselves from situations that occurred or that they created in regards to their accountability. They're gonna push it away. And this also is something that is seen in this video, and I'm going to show you.
And the flies here are like pretty intense, so the flies are definitely going to get into her. There might be a great area, so I think you're hanging out at the coffee shop. We got back to the building, obviously great and stuff. And I moved our food around as a result, so it's mostly just sitting on the back. It was probably both of you. He was just I'm dirty and I can't change being dirty. Like I got dirty feet, I got sand on my gloves and stuff like that. It was if you're at the coffee shop for so long, if you're living behind trees. So yeah, there's a few little things, just some relationships.
The abusers are also big on over sensationalizing the other person's emotions. Like they'll make it seem like this person is hysterical or they're out of control. They'll use language to actually suggest these things.
She just gets worked up sometimes. I try and really disrespect her, so like I screaming there. And I'm just screaming as if she was getting all worked up, and I'm saying, that's okay, thanks.
They'll suggest these things and quickly gaze over the fact that they actually created this hostility. They'll also gaze over the fact that they have been the problem in boundary crossing. They will cross the person's boundaries and then quickly, like, I don't know, they just became hysterical, or you know, they get worked up a lot. They'll use words like
know I should push back, let's try to push away. Let's take a little step back and breathe.
Using this kind of language, it's a part of manipulation. They're manipulating the situation. That's what manipulation is. Manipulation is actually twisting things to go in another person's favor. And in this case, it's going to be the abuser's favor. Now, why are they doing that? Now, what is the abuser gaining out of this while they do that? Well, when they twist the story and they twist facts and they minimize their part.
I didn't get overtly physical. I'm just trying to keep it away.
And then minimize their contributions. What they're doing? Well, they're dodging accountability. And what they're gaining pity. They're gaining alliances. People to be like, yeah, I totally agree with you. I could totally relate.
Little things. Just some relationship. I've been married for over 5 years now. So there's a lot of little things.
Right? People start believing their story. They start dodging judgment. They start dodging accountability. They start becoming the victim and the other person starts becoming the oppressor. Now, in this case, you can clearly see how Gabby quickly became the oppressor.
The male is going to be our victim.
The abuser. She is the crazy one. She's the problem. She's the person who's confused. She's the person who's emotional. She's the person who's unhinged. So let's read a statement from the police department. I observed some small scratches to Brian's right arm, and when I asked him about them, he supposed they must have happened when Gabrielle was trying to get his attention about me being behind them with my lights on. This, however, was not consistent with Gabrielle's statement, further suggesting her confused and emotional state. So here we have two conflicting statements, no eyewitnesses, and it's believed that she's the one who's, of course, confused. While the true abuser is the person who's being treated like a king. Now, it's not uncommon for abusers and assailants to use reactive abuse to manipulate officers, police officers, and get things such as like order protections in their favor, to use it in court cases. And in this situation, that's exactly what's going to happen. One of the reasons why reactive abuse is so manipulative is because it keeps the person who's being abused focused on their outbursts, on their emotions, on their behavior, rather than focus on what is happening right in front of their eyes, which is the abuse and the abuser. They're too busy internalizing what they did wrong and apologizing and trying to correct their behavior, and they take on the blame rather than seeing what's actually going on. Now, the longer the person who's being abused stays stuck in the blame game and they feel responsible, it's going to be easier to manipulate them, and they're going to stay in it prolonged. They're going to stay prolonged in the feelings of blame, shame, and responsibility. They're going to be taking on the accountability and carrying the emotional weight of the whole relationship and why it's falling apart when it really has nothing to do with them. So what you'll see a lot in people who are victims is going to be a lot of apologizing, a lot of blaming. They are internalizing it. So they're going to be self-blaming, and they're going to be blaming themselves for creating feelings and actions in the other person. Like, I'm sorry I did this because I made him upset. I'm sorry I did this. I'm sorry that I have OCD. I'm sorry that I'm clean and, I get him frustrated.
And I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I just get really frustrated. I'm not like mean towards him. I just I guess my vibe is I'm like in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I just been really stressed. I had so much work.
That keeps the person focused on their responses to the occurrence instead of the occurrence itself, instead of the acts of abuse that is actually happening. And what happens is that the person who's being abused, they start becoming out of character. They start not acting like themselves. They start responding in ways that they feel out of control. And they do a lot of things that they normally wouldn't do because they're being pushed to the brink. Their back is against the wall and they don't realize what's happening. So when they create these outbursts, and they feel responsible, and it could be anywhere from police being called on them to something minor of, having outbursts in restaurants and having outbursts in outings. and their friends looking at them like, oh my God, why did you respond that way? So they feel shame, they take on the blame, they take on the shame, and they feel shameful in themselves because they know that that's not how they behave, but they don't understand why they're doing it. So because of that, they might be a person who takes accountability. So what they're going to do is they're going to take accountability and they're going to apologize, and they're going to go to their abuser and tell them they're so sorry for how they reacted. They should have done better. And they apologize, boom, everybody's lovey, hunky-dory, everything gets back to normal, and then the cycle continues. So it's a vicious cycle, vicious play of manipulation and playing on another person's emotions. And it's a power play because the abuser has control over your emotions and over how you are emotionally reacting to situations. So reactive abuse could be detrimental to an abused person. It can seal your fate. What a reactive abuse looks like. This is how it could play out. This is how it could seal your fate. And I wouldn't be surprised that this whole situation is going to be used in his favor when they do catch him, if they catch him, that if something happened that he was involved in, which we already could sense that it was, he wouldn't be on the run if he had nothing to do with her death. It's going to be framed as self-defense, because they already set the groundwork with this inaccurate police work of not knowing what red flags to look for, that he was the victim. She was unstable, she was abusive, she was first to hit, she was problematic, she suffered from high levels of anxiety, she had mental health issues, this was a mental health call. The groundwork has been set for his defense, and trust me, he is going to take advantage of it. It's going to work in his favor. And this is going to be something that's going to be highly problematic when this goes to trial. So reactive abuse is a real thing. This is one thing to keep in mind about reactive abuse or anyone who triggers you. While people might trigger us and they might create these hostile environments, hostile situations within us, it is still our responsibility, and we are accountable for our own actions. So it's super important if you're around someone that you're noticing these situations take place and you're noticing that you are emotionally distressed around someone and they create these responses in you and you're responding badly and you why am I responding this way? Disengage from that person. That person is highly toxic for you, and you never know how far these situations can get, right? This situation could be a big wake-up call and really educational for a lot of people who constantly continue perpetuating and constantly nurturing situations of the such. I have been in a situation of the such myself. And one thing that helped me is that I'm super reflective and super intuitive. And I had to take a step back and say, wait a minute, what is going on here? Why every time this person comes around, I feel defensive? Why every time this person comes around, I become a person that I don't even like? I'm betraying myself in these scenarios. What is it about this person? So you have to be reflective and accountable for your own actions. Take a step back. Look at it closely, logically, take the emotions out of the situation and start making decisions for yourself. We have to go into situations where having enough and strong emotional fortitude to be able to look at situations clearly. We have to be able to control our emotions. These people are young and probably haven't been taught to do so. And that's why it's so important to get educated on emotional abuse, emotional dynamics, narcissistic individuals, problematic and toxic relationships, even if you're not in one, so you could be able to mentor and coach someone else and possibly save a life and possibly give healthy direction and guidance to someone who's going through this. It's super imperative that we all become aware, even if you are not the topic and the person who's going through it. If you're not the topic of discussion and you're not the person who's directly inverted into these situations, it's still super educational for you to become aware. And that's why I've been really trying to get awareness out on these topics. So if you're not aware, you become a little bit more aware, and as well, you continue to do your own research on it. So I bring the topics up for discussion if you never heard of them, but I really encourage people to keep on educating themselves and keep on diving into these subjects. It's great for personal development. Once you master yourself, you can help other people master themselves. Once you master your emotions and your reactions, no one, and I truly mean no one, can ever manipulate you, because you are grounded in who you are. You are grounded in what you know. You have facts, you have education to back it up. A lot of us are ignorant to certain topics and subjects, and a lot of people have a problem with that word ignorance, but ignorance just means you're not educated on the topic, and we all, including myself, are ignorant to certain things that play out. And if you haven't been subjected to it and you haven't been aware of it, you are going to be ignorant to it. So it's okay to say that you're ignorant to a topic, but willfully being ignorant to something is something you don't want to participate in. You want to make sure that you are doing your due diligence and becoming aware and making yourself super powerful, because knowledge is power. And I will see you all in my next one.